Hello BookTube! Welcome to Lizzie Faye Loves Books. I'm Elizabeth, and this is going to be my wrap-up for RYBSAT Round 8. Now, it seems like I cannot ever start a readathon with a clean slate. I am always finishing up something from the previous week or the previous month or whatever before I can start officially a readathon, and that was true in this case as well. I had even said in my last wrap-up for April that on the day I did my filming, it was April 30th, and I said I have 3 chapters left in this book and I don't see any reason why I can't finish this before the end of the day. Well, I lied. There was actually 4.5 chapters in this book that I hadn't read, and I didn't mean to lie. I just didn't realize. I thought it was farther along than I was, and I just kept postponing until I got later and later. I was trying to edit that particular video, and long story short, I didn't get it read until the next day. I did stay up late, and at midnight when RYBSAT was starting, I was trying to read this, and I got sleepy. I just had to go to bed, but I did end up getting up very early. I went on Twitter, and I saw that they were already sprinting for RYBSAT, and so I joined in. I was still reading this book, but I did join in. In fact, that's the first time I've ever joined in on any reading sprints on Twitter, and it was a lot of fun. I finished this book before we went to church on Sunday morning, so I was very, very happy with myself. And so I've already talked about this a little bit in my other wrap-up, so I'm not going to go into detail. So I don't know if this really counts as my first book finished for RYBSAT. It was not on my bookshelf that I counted for RYBSAT, but I did finish it during that time. So first book for RYBSAT. Now I want to take you to my bedtime bookshelf, which is where my official RYBSAT bookshelf is, and show you the 11 books that I attempted to read. I did finish 9 out of the 11 books on that shelf, and read 100 pages in the 10th one. The 11th book that's on that shelf I'm not going to read right now. I'm going to put it back farther onto my TBR, but I'm very, very excited. If you didn't see my TBR video for RYBSAT, there is a shelf that's built into my bed. My husband and I each have a bookshelf right in the head of our bed, and then an open space in the middle where we keep our TV remotes and things like that. The books that have been in that shelf, the majority of them have been there several years, and I was really needing to get them read. The majority of them were very short. Only one book was over 300 pages, and all the rest of them were 200 pages and under. So let me take you now to my bedtime bookshelf and show you what I read. Okay, so here is my bookshelf that is built into my bed, and I mentioned before that there were a few books here that are devotional books. They're kind of page-a-day type books, and I did not read any of those this week. I started here, and actually when I started the week I had all of these books to push to that side, and then as I finished them I would move them over one at a time. So this is the book that I was reading when the week ended. I did get 100 pages into this book, and it does have 348 pages, so I did pretty good. I got 9 books finished here, and then 100 pages in the 10th one, and then the 11th one called It Takes a Parent. I am not going to read it anytime soon. Since I didn't get to it, I'm just going to leave it here on the shelf, and maybe I will put some more books here. Once I move these books, I will probably pick out some more short books and put them here, and whatever's here when the next RYBSAT rolls around, then I will attempt to read those then, because I really like having this little contained shelf here, and I think it's an ideal shelf for a read your own bookshelf-a-thon. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and pick these books up and take them back into the office where I usually film so that I can show you each of the books I read. Okay, so after I got finished with Dave Ramsey's Complete Guide to Money, I moved on to the actual books from my bedtime bookshelf, which I just showed you, and the first 3 books on that shelf were 3 children's books. Now I started out, I went smallest to largest, and I thought I would be able to finish all of these in one day, but because I had to read about 60 pages of this book, I did not quite get finished with the longer chapter book, but that's okay. This one is actually 2 books in one. It's about 60 pages, so it's not quite as short as you might think. The Fairy Treasure Hunt and a fairy ballet. This is part of the Rainbow Magic Fairy series that is by Daisy Meadows. Now, Daisy Meadows is actually a pseudonym for a group of people that write this series. I am mostly familiar with the chapter books from this series. My daughter Katie read a lot of the chapter books when she was in the third, fourth, fifth grade, and so this, I'm pretty sure, came free to me with Kellogg points, and and as I recall, I ordered it with the intention of giving it to a school teacher, but when it came, I thought, well, I'll read it first and then I'll pass it on to a teacher. And it sat on my bedtime bookshelf for a couple of years, I guess, and I just kind of forgot it was there. Now, on Goodreads, the only editions I could find of this book were separate, so they're listed separately on my Goodreads. That was good in a way because I was able to give them separate ratings, because I liked the Fairy Ballet much better than the Fairy Treasure Hunt. The Fairy Treasure Hunt was kind of boring. They were given an assignment, I think, from the fairy godmother to find their jewels, and that was their final test to be full-fledged fairies. And they pretty much all found their jewels without really any conflict. The last one maybe had to look a tiny bit harder than the others, but there wasn't really any kind of conflict, and I think it would have been better if there had been. A fairy ballet, I thought, was much better. And again, it didn't really have a lot of conflict either, but one of the fairies had stage fright and she was worried that she was going to mess up. So the other fairies had to work with her and practice with her and help her and encourage her. So I thought that was a really good theme, and I enjoyed it much more than the other one. Now, this is more of like a first or second grade level, but if you have daughters who are in like the third, fourth, fifth grade that like, you know, fairies and girly stuff like this, let me recommend the chapter books by Daisy Meadows to you as well, because they're cute, fun stories, and I know that my daughter Katie enjoyed them a lot when she was that age. Then this was one that Katie wanted me to read several years ago, and again, it sat on that shelf for years, and I finally got around to reading it. It's called Cat Diaries, Secret Writings of the Meow Society by Betsy Byers, Betsy Duffey, and Laurie Myers. And it was basically little short stories. The premise was that the whole cat community got together annually to share their stories and their writings, and so different ones got up and read stories that they'd written or read about adventures that they had had, and also stories from the past. And it was cute. Some of the stories were better than others, but it was a fun little book, and I can see why my daughter enjoyed it in elementary school, but there's not a lot here for an older student. This is definitely for an early reader, like in third or fourth grade. And then this is a fun book. This is by Whoopi Goldberg. She has a whole series of the Sugar Plum ballerinas. This one is called Plum Fantastic, and this is the first in the series. I really, really enjoyed it. This is a really good friendship story, and that happens to be the theme this month for monthly recommendations. So I will probably talk about this book a little bit there, even though it's really an elementary school book. It is a chapter book. It's about 150 pages, very appropriate for a fourth or fifth grader, and it's very sweet. It's about a girl whose mother is a single mom, and her mother grew up in New York, and they moved to Georgia because her father had a job there, and then her father has passed away, and so her mother is a costume designer and would like to go back to New York, where she's from, and be able to have a costume design business and be right close to Broadway. So Alexandra is the daughter, and so the mom and Alexandra move to Harlem, and she puts Alexandra in dance there. Alexandria really wants to be a speed skater. That is her goal. She idolizes a particular speed skater and really wants to emulate her, but her mother wants her to emulate a dancer that she knew in New York who had performed with the Harlem Ballet and is now teaching. So she puts Alexandria in a class taught by this particular teacher, and so when she gets there, you know, she has to make friends, and there's of course cliques within the class, and the friends that she ends up making are just wonderful. They're all kind of have their eccentricities in different ways, and so they do a drawing for who's going to play the lead in the ballet recital, and of course Alexandria is the least likely to be picked, but she gets picked, and her friends really rally together to help her and practice with her and learn this dance, and it's just really cute. It's a sweet story of friendship. And then about the time she gets to where she really wants to stay, her mother decides that maybe she can't make it in New York after all, and maybe they'll have to go back to Georgia. So there's that story of how then that the girls kind of rally around and do some things to help her mother and the costume business and all that. So I thought that it was very well written, and if I get a chance, I may pick up some more from this series. My daughter is a little past this reading level, but they were very cute stories, and I did really enjoy reading this one. The next one I read was a little novella by Janette Oke called The Matchmakers. Janette Oke is a very prolific Christian author. I've read almost all of her series books, but hardly any of her standalones. Now, she has some standalones that are full-size novels, and then she has a few that are these little hardback novellas, and this was really cute. It was fairly predictable, but yet there were a couple of twists, one that I predicted and the other that I didn't, and so yeah, it was very cute, and it's Christian-based, but it's just a fun little story when you have a few minutes to sit down and read something that is a feel-good story. Then I read A Life God Rewards by Bruce Wilkinson, and this brought out some points that I had not really thought about in my Christian walk, and it was interesting. It's basically talking about rewards in heaven, and I've always been taught to believe that, you know, if you're a Christian and you are going to heaven, then that is enough of a reward in and of itself. And this kind of goes a step further and talking about levels of rewards in heaven, and I'm not sure what I believe about all of that. I'd have to do some further study, but it was very interesting, and I enjoyed reading it. It was very short, so you know, as a Christian, it's always good, you know, we can never know everything there is to know about the Bible because there's just too much there, and so much of it we just have to say, okay, I'm never going to be able to understand this, so I'll just have to take your word for it, God, and we really don't know. But again, it was very interesting to think about. I would have to give it some more thought and study before I say exactly what I believe on this topic. So the next book I read for RYBSAT was this short little inspirational book by Emilie Barnes called My Cup Overflows. This was written at a time in her life when she had been experiencing some setbacks with her health, and there were some members of her family who were unhappy and were going through some issues, and so this was written at a time in her life where she had kind of come through the worst of that and was able to talk about it and share what she'd gone through and how God was bringing her through it, and I thought it was very inspirational. The next one I read is it's called Because I'm the Mother, That's Why by Stephanie Pierson. This is a really cute book, but it's very dated. It was written in the 90s, and it has a lot of pop culture references for the 90s and earlier. So I think if you're someone who's my age or older, you wouldn't have any trouble getting a lot of the references that she tells in this book. Some of the humor in this would be lost on moms that are younger than me because they wouldn't get a lot of the references, and I didn't even get quite all of the references, but I got enough of them that I could see the humor, and I thought there were definitely parts of it that were very funny, but it was very dated. I just picked this up at a library book sale several years ago. I thought the title was very cute. I'm glad I read it. I thought it was very humorous. And then I got to go back to one of my favorite genres, which is dystopian. This is book 3 in the Shadow Children series by Margaret Peterson Haddix. This one's called Among the Betrayed. The first book in this series is called Among the Hidden. And so if you have an interest in reading this series, definitely start at the beginning. The series is about a future world where it is illegal to have more than 2 children in a family, and everyone has to have an identification. You have to have it on you because there are a lot of families who have disobeyed that rule and given birth to a 3rd child. The 3rd children of the world are in danger. They could be put to death if they are found out, and the parents could be put to death as well. So it's a very dangerous world, but yet there are 3rd children that are living in hiding, and there are families who perhaps they had a child who died young, and they will take that child's ID and sell it on the black market so that other children who are 3rd children have an opportunity to take over their identity and be able to live out in the open. So it's a very interesting premise, and I read the first 2 several years ago, and I really enjoyed them. And I think I got hung up on this third one because it is the main character of the third book is a girl that we only meet in the second book, and she's not that big of a character even in the second book. So I kind of had a hard time putting her in the role of the protagonist, but once I got into it, it was a very good book. Now, I believe book 4 is going to take us back to the original protagonist, which is Lucas. So I'm guessing that now Nina and Lucas are going to band together to work to make some changes in their society in future books. And then I read What Kids Need Most in a Mom by Patricia H. Rushford. And this book went through a lot of different aspects of parenting and a lot of different things, but really the biggest takeaway I got from this book is that what kids need most in a mom is me. And she actually made that statement right at the end of the book because, you know, we're all different, our kids are different, situations are different, and really just being there for your kids is the best and biggest thing that you can do for them. I did get some motivation and some inspiration from this book, and I enjoyed reading it. So then I read the first 100 pages of this book during the last day of RYBSAT. This book contains 3 novellas by Deborah White Smith. The book itself is called Texas Neighbors. The stories in here are called The Key, The Promise, and The Neighbor. Now, The Key and The Promise are related stories. In The Key, which is the shortest book in this bind-up, it's about a woman who's actually my age, 51. She's widowed. She's been widowed for several years, and she owns a coffee shop, I believe. She calls for a locksmith one day, and lo and behold, the locksmith is her high school sweetheart, who she had kind of jilted when he went off to the Vietnam War. She fell in love and married someone else while he was gone, and she always felt bad about it. But now he's back in her life. He's also widowed, and so you kind of get from the first couple pages that they're probably going to renew their romance and be together. Well, so that's no surprise. Where the conflict comes in is with her grandchildren. Now, the main character, Brendy, has a son and 2 grandchildren who live with her because the daughter-in-law had abandoned the family a couple of years prior, and so now she's helping to raise her 2 young grandchildren. Now, her grandchildren have experienced their mom finding a new boyfriend and leaving them. Now that their grandmother has a new boyfriend, they're afraid that she's going to leave them too. And so they begin to throw all kinds of things into the works to try to keep this from happening. So that's cute. And then the second story is about Brendy's son, Kent, and his children. And now we have a love interest for Kent. So this time, the kids really want to get them together because they really like Sylvia, who is actually an employee of Brendy's, and they want their dad and Sylvia to get married. So they just end up embarrassing them to death in all kinds of situations, and everything of course backfires, and then Sylvia begins to wonder if really this is God's will for her life. And these are Christian romances, by the way. And then Kent is not really sure that he wants to marry again after being jilted by his first wife, and so it's their story of you know, how they can work through all those issues. The third novella is called The Neighbor, and I still have about 60 pages left to read in it, and I am really enjoying it a lot more than the first 2 stories, and I think it's because there's a mystery involved. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that after I finish reading it, but I'm enjoying it a lot. It is about a female dentist. She's having a staycation and working on some remodeling projects in her home, and her neighbor has just moved in, and he is a man who is getting ready to dig a swimming pool in his backyard, and they've never met. But when the digger goes to begin the digging, they find bodies in his yard. So she's looking over the fence trying to figure out what's going on, and that's how they meet. And but there's a mystery then of who these bodies are, and now someone is trying to kill Alyssa. There's a lot of really interesting things going on in this particular story. It's the longest of all 3 of them. The first one was only about 88 pages. The second one was closer to 100 pages, and then the third book is about 150 pages. It's very good though, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it ends. Those are the books I read for RYBSAT. Now, during that week, I listened to a little bit of audiobooks. The book I would have listened to in my kitchen, Clockwork Angel by Cassandra Clare, I listened to a little bit of it, but I tell you, this last week and a half since May started, I have really been wanting to catch up with watching YouTube videos. So I can't listen to this in my kitchen and listen to YouTube videos. So it's one or the other. So I've chosen the first 10 days of this month to catch up with some of my videos. Now I've got to get busy though and get on this one, because after this I also have the audiobook of All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. My husband's listening to the audiobook right now, so I'm showing you the print book. But I have both of them checked out from the library, because this is my book club book for the library, which meets about 10 days from right now when I'm filming this. So I need to finish this, and by the time I get this done, hopefully my husband will be done with the audio and I can go ahead and listen to this. I could go ahead and start reading this in print, but I think I will do better just to wait for the audio. I think I'll get through it a lot quicker that way, because I have so many other things that I want to read in print. And I mentioned in my last April wrap-up that I had listened to Home to Harmony by Philip Gulley. I have listened to this 2 more times now, for a total of 3 times. This book is just wonderful. I have really been enjoying this book, and I now have Just Shy of Harmony, which is the second book in the series, and I am on the first tape of it right now. Now, the one thing about this book that I did not mention in my April wrap-up was the narrator. This first book, Home to Harmony, is narrated by Philip Gulley, the author. And at first, I didn't really think I was going to like his narration, because I have to say, despite how he looks on the back of the box, he sounds very elderly, and I don't know if he did that on purpose or if that's just really how he sounds. Even my daughter Katie expressed something negative in the car. I can't remember exactly what she said, but as I started to get into the story, and as I went back and listened to it again 2 more times, I have to say I really started enjoying his narration. Now, he sounds elderly, but the character of Sam Gardner is around like 39 or early 40s, something like that, in this first book. So the main character is not elderly. So eventually I kind of got in my head how I thought he looked, because at first I had this picture in my mind of an older person, you know, nearing retirement and all that, but you know, that's Father Tim from the Mitford series. So but Sam Gardner is just a young, you know, 39ish minister with 2 young sons and a young wife. He's been married to his wife 10 years, and so once I kind of wrapped my mind around the fact that he was not elderly, I started really enjoying it. And the timing that Philip Gulley had, his dry wit and his sense of humor and different tones, and just the way he delivered the punchlines of some of these really funny moments were just really good. So now that I am listening to Just Shy of Harmony, it's not Philip Gulley. I finally got used to him, and it's not him now. This is narrated by Norman Dietz, and I've heard him before, but I can't remember where. I know I've heard his voice before. But this book is written in 3rd person, so maybe it was planned all along that they would have a different voice for this. But I got so used to hearing Philip Gulley, because I listened to that 3 times, that now I'm having a hard time getting used to this one, and I'm not enjoying it quite as much. This is the only one that the library has on audio anyway, so the rest of the books I'm going to have to read in print, so I'll be able to kind of hear Philip Gulley's voice as I read instead of this one, and I think that I will enjoy it better when I kind of hear it from his point of view. So anyway, they're both very good, and it shouldn't really matter who the narrator is or how they talk, but it does. You know, if you've listened to very many audiobooks, you know that sometimes the narrator can make or break a story for you. So it's important to the story to enjoy the narrator, to have a complete, enjoyable experience. Another audiobook I'm listening to is Yes Please by Amy Poehler, and those of you who have listened to this on audio know that it is narrated by Amy Poehler, and it's a lot of fun. I'm a big fan of SNL. Everybody always says, oh, the first year was the best. Well, that wasn't my year. I really loved the group from the 80s and 90s, like Dana Carvey, Mike Myers, and then Will Ferrell, Sherry O'Terry, Chris Kattan, that bunch. Those were my favorites, but I know that Amy Poehler is very talented and very funny, so I am enjoying this. There's a little bit of swearing in it, and it's funny because, you know, I'm getting a reputation on BookTube for not liking any bad language, and the people in my real life know that too, because when I was checking this out at the library, one of the other library staff walked by and she saw that I was getting this, and she says, "Oh, just so you know, that does have some bad language. I know you don't like that, so I just wanted you to know." And, you know, thanks. I wish that I knew that about every book going into it. So, so anyway, I am about probably 2 hours into this. It's 7.5 hours total, and I'm enjoying it so far. And then I also just started Blankets by Craig Thompson. This is an all black and white graphic novel. I have only ever seen one person talk about this. It was Christine from Kizzy Reads was reading this a month or two ago, and I checked, and only one library in our county had this, and it was checked out, so I had to wait on it a little while, but now I have it. I wasn't sure if I was going to like it, but Christine said that she really enjoyed it. It's very raw emotionally. There is a lot of themes and topics, even just in the first chapter, that are tough. And but there's not a lot of bad language. I think there was only in the first chapter. It's divided into 9 parts, and so I've read the first part. Only in part 1, the F word was used one time, and it was in a bullying type situation, so it was very realistic. And I think it's going to take us through the life of this person. He's a young boy in the first chapter, and I think it's going to I think the book is kind of his life story, and so I'll let you know what I think of it when I get all done with it. So that is what I read for RYBSAT, and also what I'm currently reading and the audiobooks that I am currently listening to. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this video here, but I am also going to film today my TBR for the rest of May, which will include Middle Grade May Reads, which is a readathon at the end of May hosted by ACOS. So stay tuned to my channel for that video as well. So for now, I hope you're having a great day. Read a good book, and God bless you.